The first seed of doubt wasn't planted by a late-night text or a mysterious phone call. It was the silence. For 3 years, David and I had a rhythm, a morning coffee together, a thinking of you text at noon, and a shared recap of our days at 7 p.m. But lately, the rhythm had flatlined. David started coming home late, smelling of a cologne he didn't own, and his phone, which used to sit face up on the counter, was now a permanent extension of his hand, always face down. I tried to brush it off as work stress. After all, David was a senior analyst at a firm that demanded long hours. But my gut, that primal instinct that never lies, was screaming. One Tuesday evening, I decided to test the waters. I told him I was staying at my mother's house for the night to help her with some errands. I watched his face closely. Instead of the expected disappointment, I saw a flicker of relief cross his eyes. "Take your time, honey," he said, barely looking up from his laptop. "I'll probably just stay late at the office anyway." I left the house, drove around the block, and parked in the shadows of the park across the street. I waited for 2 hours. At exactly 9:15 p.m., a red sedan I didn't recognize pulled into our driveway. A woman stepped out, blonde, wearing a dress that looked like it cost more than our monthly mortgage. She didn't knock. She walked straight to the front door and let herself in with a key. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles turned white. The light in our master bedroom flickered on. I didn't cry. I didn't storm the house. I took a deep breath and realized that the man I thought I knew was a fiction. The investigation had officially begun. For the next 10 days, I became a ghost in my own life. I acted the part of the devoted, unsuspecting partner, while I methodically dismantled David's secret world. I hired a private investigator to track the red sedan, and the results were more devastating than I could have imagined. The woman was Tiffany, the daughter of David's boss. This wasn't just an affair. It was a career move. David was trading our marriage for a fast track to a partnership. I waited until David was in the shower to clone his phone. I found a second encrypted messaging app where he and Tiffany exchanged thousands of messages. They talked about me as if I were a chore, a starter wife, that David was planning to discard once his promotion was finalized in 2 weeks. They even discussed how he would graciously offer me the house in the divorce to keep me quiet about his financial discrepancies at work, discrepancies I hadn't even known existed until that moment. I spent my nights at the kitchen table after he fell asleep, downloading bank records and internal company memos he had foolishly saved to our shared cloud. I discovered David had been cooking the books to make his department look more profitable, likely to impress Tiffany's father. I wasn't just looking at a cheating husband. I was looking at a white-collar criminal. Every piece of data I saved was another brick in the wall I was building around his future. He thought he was playing a game of chess, but I was the one who owned the board. The night of our 3rd anniversary was supposed to be a quiet dinner at home. David had bought me an expensive necklace, likely paid for with the bonus he got from his fraudulent reports. He looked at me with a smile that felt like a snake's hiss. "To many more years," he said, raising his glass. I looked at him, truly looked at him, and felt nothing but cold, hard resolve. "Actually, David," I said, my voice as sharp as a razor, "I think we should talk about Tiffany." The color drained from his face, so fast it was almost comical. He tried the standard lies. She was just a colleague. I was being paranoid. Work was stressful. But I didn't argue. I simply reached into my purse and pulled out a stack of 8 by 10 photos of them together at a hotel. I laid them out on the dinner table, like a deck of cards. Then, I pulled out my laptop and played the audio recording of them discussing his plan to leave me after the promotion. David's arrogance crumbled into a pathetic, stuttering mess. He fell to his knees, literally grabbing at my hem. "It was a mistake. She pushed herself on me. I only did it for us, for our future." He started sobbing, the kind of ugly, performative crying that makes you lose all respect for a person. I stood up and walked away, leaving him on the floor with the evidence of his betrayal scattered around him. I didn't need to hear his excuses. I had already called the one person who would care most about David's extracurricular activities. Tiffany's father. The aftermath was a whirlwind of professional and personal destruction. I hadn't just sent the photos to Tiffany's father. I had sent the forensic audit of David's fraudulent department reports to the firm's board of directors. Within 12 hours, David was escorted out of his office by security. He didn't just lose the promotion, he lost his career, his reputation, and his standing in the industry. Tiffany, seeing that David was no longer a rising star but a liability, blocked his number before he even made it to the parking lot. David spent the next week camping out in his car in front of our house, sending me hundreds of emails and texts. He begged for one last chance to explain. He claimed he was mentally unstable and that I was his only anchor. He even tried to use our shared memories, the trip to Paris, the day we bought the house, to guilt-trip me into forgiveness. But every time I felt a flicker of sympathy, I looked at the recording of him calling me a starter wife. I changed the locks, filed for a restraining order, and put the house on the market. I didn't want a single thing that reminded me of the life he had tainted. I watched from the window as the police finally arrived to move him along. He looked small, broken, and utterly defeated. He had traded everything for a shadow of a dream, and now he was left with nothing but the reality of his own choices. Justice wasn't just a concept. It was the quiet peace I felt as I watched his taillights disappear down the street. 6 months later, the dust had finally settled. The divorce was finalized, and because of the evidence of his financial fraud and infidelity, I walked away with the majority of our assets. David was facing a civil lawsuit from his former firm, and was living in a run-down studio apartment, working a retail job just to make ends meet. He still tried to call me from burner phones, his voice cracking as he begged for a conversation. "I still love you," he would whisper. I would just hang up. Love without respect is just a hollow word. I used my share of the settlement to start my own consulting firm. I was no longer the supportive wife standing in the background. I was the CEO of my own destiny. I ran into Tiffany's father at a gala a few weeks ago. He thanked me for the heads up and told me that David's replacement was doing a much better job. Honestly, it felt like the final piece of the puzzle falling into place. I learned that the best revenge isn't a scream or a scene. It's living a life so successful and so full that the person who tried to break you becomes nothing more than a faded, unimportant memory. David is still out there, begging for a forgiveness that will never come, while I am here, building a future that he will never be a part of. The story of us is over, but the story of me has just begun. Would you have reported his fraud to the boss, or just taken the divorce settlement? Tell me your thoughts below. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more real stories.